Welcome to my new podcast, where I talk to brewers, distillers, and other interesting craftsmen and artists and, I guess, businessmen. Daily I get the opportunity to chat and meet these interesting people, and I thought I'd just record some of our conversation and share them with you so that you can be inspired and just see that it's possible to make a living applying your craft. And in today's show, I want to welcome one of my oldest brewing friends, Peter Dean. Peter runs the Rawdons estate, where there's a beautiful hotel and obviously the Nottingham Road Craft Brewery and now the distillery. And yeah, let's listen to the conversation. Let's just welcome Peter Dean to the show today. Peter is at Nottingham Road Brewing Company at Rawdons Hotel in the Midlands. We're sitting here in the,
Boar's Head Pub.
Boar's Head Pub at the hotel.
Yeah.
And everybody who's been to Rawdons will know it. That's where you can drink a lovely pint of Notties beer. But there's a lot of things happening at Notties this year. Peter Dean has just come off his best year ever at the Nottingham Road Brewing Company, and I think you're also celebrating a big anniversary.
Yeah, thanks Holger. Thanks for having me on the show. We've been 20 years now in the industry. 21 years, 2017. So our Pickle Pig's going to be celebrating his 21st birthday. So that's rather than do the 20th, we're into the 21st. And we were started in 1996. In fact, doing a bit of brewing in 1995, but we were like 20 years ahead of our time. You know, the craft industry has only really just caught up in the last few years. Thank goodness.
That sounds a bit like Gilroy's, 180 years behind the time, or what's his slogan?
Well, we've got 20 years experience. I think that goes in the brewing industry. What we paid the school fees over and over again many years ago, and so I'd like to think we're in a good space at the moment. We've done some major expansion on the brewery, a new tap room and a deck, so I think we're in a really good space with the growth of craft beer.
So let's go back to how this thing started. I can remember meeting you in the trade 20 odd years ago, and but there's a story to it. You arrived in South Africa. When did you arrive in South Africa?
Yeah, I'm a carpenter and joiner by trade, so I did my trade in Australia. At 21, my sister was in South Africa as a Rotary Exchange student in Ashawi, Zululand. So I did what most Aussie and South Africans do. I took 2 years off and I went to UK, Europe, etc. And then I was going to make my way through overland Africa to South Africa to visit my sister and then return to Australia. But it didn't quite work out that way. I ended up getting into business in Ashawi for about 10 years in the construction industry, building log cabins way up in Zululand, Mozambique and all over the place. In 1993, I met my 1998. I met my wife, and so here I am now.
1998.
Yeah, 1998.
No.
Sorry, 88. 88. Yeah. Well, 1988. Met my wife, and so that was the end of the story. I'm still in South Africa since then.
So you got stuck here.
Yep.
And Ashawi is also famous for the Zulu blondes.
Yeah, my contacts in Ashawi were the Channels family. And what happened was when I was in Australia, there was two breweries that were making their mark in Melbourne and Perth. The Spotted Dog in Melbourne, way back in 1982, 90, maybe even 80, or late 70s, about the time that Mitchell's were getting their sort of brewing going with Lex. And it was in the back of my mind that, that's fantastic, making your own beer. I thought only big corporations had licenses to make beer. So the idea of a craft brewery in Melbourne was really appealed to me. Then America's Cup was about 1983. And Alan Bond and the crowd put Australia on the map when they won the America's Cup, and there was a little brewery there called Fremantle Brewing, which had taken off making red-black Weiss beer, funny enough. And they got very, very popular, and they were eventually bought out by Carlton United Breweries. That was always in the back of my mind. Then I arrived in South Africa, carried on in the construction industry, and then I married Sue Atwood, who was family's had a hotel in the Midlands called Rawdons. We fell on a bit of hard times in Ashawi. We had a 15-month-old son, and my wife Sue was pregnant with twins, and we went bust in the switch over from KZN Parks Board to KwaZulu Bureau of Natural Resources and the election and Mandela, and they were combining a whole lot of... Anyway, so a whole lot of contracts were cancelled overnight. So we took refuge up here at the hotel, the family hotel, which was perfect because by then Sue's parents, Don and Wendy Atwood, who had been running the place since the 70s, had had enough, and they said, thank you very much, you can just caretake the hotel, and 25 years later we're still here. And in that process, I said to Don, hey, you know, we couldn't get SAB on tap at the hotel because we didn't have the volumes, and in those days, in the 90s, SAB wasn't keen on draft beer. It was just about pumping glass bottles. Yeah. So we had... I said to Don Atwood, father-in-law, I said, you know, we must build a brewery here. And he said, well, you know, who's going to run it? And I said, well, you know, we're here now. So, and he went to an auction in about 1995, and it was the little brewery was up for sale there, which we went and we bid, and he came home one day and said, hey, we've just bought a little brewery.
And what brewery was that? The one from Durban?
Yeah, the name just escapes me now. It'll come. And funny enough, old Mitchell was the brewer there, Andy Mitchell. Mm-hmm. And
I know where there's a bottle of that particular beer in the New Hanover Hotel.
Oh, really?
So I can drive past there and
okay.
have a look what it's called.
It's irritating me that I can't remember. But
Crawford's,
yeah, of course. Crawford's. And we actually went to the auction. We bought the little test plant, not the big one. And Graham Crawford was going to be unemployed after that auction, so we managed to coax him into coming with the brewery. We put him up at the hotel here and gave his wife a job, and they actually got the little brew house working to a certain extent. But Graham, eventually, he was more an engineer and an entrepreneur than a brewer, which is why Andy Mitchell was working with him at the time. Mm-hmm. So he eventually moved on, and we had this little 50-litre framework with kegs stacked on top of each other. So it was a 4-vessel brew house. It had a kettle, whirlpool, etc.
Probably the size of a homebrew kit.
It was, exactly. It was the old 50-litre kegs with the top cut off. And it worked very well, but we could piggyback beers and do 2 to 3 brews a day. So we would end up with, we built some fermenters which were 120 litres, so we could do almost 340 litre brews a day. So we'd have 120 litres, which is 2 kegs after nearly 12-15 hours work.
And this all because SAB neglected the draft business.
Yeah, 100%. And then we were battling a bit because even Graham Crawford sort of got us onto extract rather than full malt, full mash. So we heard that there was a guy that had retired from SAB by the name of Trevor Morgan, and he was busy with a steel and wheel franchise down in Maritzburg, and he was very unhappy there. After being a top brewer, a chemist in the SAB, he was now fixing wheels and etc. and tyres. So we got hold of him, and he said, great, let's come up. So he went from operating some of the biggest breweries in South Africa down in our cellar and doing full mash now. And our crystal malt, he actually did in a little coffee grinder because he only needed 1 kilo.
We still at 50 liters now.
Yeah.
Okay.
So he went from this massive trillions of liters to doing his crystal malt in a coffee grinder, and so Trevor joined our business and became a shareholder, and then we built the new brewery, the 10 hectoliter brewery where it currently is. But in those days there was no real off-the-shelf equipment. We couldn't just buy stuff from a
Eddie Swart or...
That's right, yeah. Or we went to a couple of the drink techs in Munich. We went to the drink tech shows, and we did the university. The trade shows. Then we went to the the Oktoberfest. So it was a bit of a double bonus, and we had got a lot of experience with what people were doing over there, but we couldn't get anyone to manufacture here, and the cost of importing was just over the roof. And there wasn't a lot of microbreweries, as they call them there, on offer in those days, a few from Italy. So the other one was Joseph Martin had the Farmers Brew House up in Danhauser. So we were quite good friends with him. So we went and looked at a lot of breweries, and we actually designed and fabricated our own brew house. Everything from the PLC to the actuators, the heating system, because we've got our boiler's quite unique, that the beer flows through tubes outside the mash tun or the kettle. So we get a really good hot boil, hot break, and I think that's one of the reasons it's done so well. And Trevor was with us for about 10 years, and then unfortunately had stomach cancer and passed away.
Mm-hmm.
So
and during this time you sold mainly at Rawdons?
Yeah, we predict mostly at the hotel here. In those days, I suppose we're only doing about 2,000 to 3,000 litres a month.
Okay.
We then grew quite quickly. We went into the 1 litre PET bottles.
Yes,
we did it. Steve Floyd from Floyd on Beer was our agent in Joburg in those days.
And I think that's about the time when our paths crossed.
Yeah, exactly. Funny enough, just about 2 years later, we purchased the farm next door after our brewery was finished. And on that farm came a little house on the edge of the road, which was the old ganger's cottage. So the railway used to actually go in front of the hotel. And the Bierfassl, as it's known now, was the ganger's cottage. So it had 5 bedrooms and a big lounge, and it was right on the railway line. The road came from the back. So when we purchased the farm, we thought, what are we going to do with this little house? And a good friend of ours from Michael House, Ken Shooter, was at that time looking to retire from Michael House. So he used to go to Germany or Austria once a year and run a little beer strubel during the ski season. So he said, let's build a beer house there. So we said, great, because then all the booze cruisers can go to the Fassl instead of Rawdons. So we built the Bierfassl in also 1999, and we had but we couldn't make a light lager. Well, we didn't have a light lager, so along came Holger with in your Bavaria days.
I was happy to sell you the light lager.
Yeah, and you were very into it because it was a German theme with the Eisbein and everything else. So our paths crossed way back in '99. So it's been a long haul.
I was having a discussion with my wife because we also installed Scrumpy Jack.
Yep.
Do you remember that?
Yep, that's right. Yep.
And we bartered a keg of Scrumpy Jack for a 2-night stay at the Rawdons Hotel. And we were trying to work out, it was our wedding anniversary, and I was a poor beer rep, not earning anything. So I took a keg of Scrumpy Jack and bartered it for a 2-night.
Oh, I'm still keen to do that now.
So you say that must have been around 99, 2000.
Correct, yeah.
I thought it was a bit earlier, but yeah. Okay.
And our turnover went up quite sharply because we were one of the only microbreweries in KZN, and one of 3 or 4 in the whole of South Africa in those days, Gilroy's, etc. And I think that there was a lot of TV teams came up to do a series on making beer, and we had a little black pig here for a while that used to drink the beer, and so we went through a really massive spike in interest, mainly about the concept of the beer, but not so much a big beer culture. People would still arrive here, and I would say, do you want a micro beer, as we used to call it in those days? And they would say, well, what's the closest to Castle or Hansa? And we said, no, well, nothing really. But so we actually had to develop our lagers, which you don't see very much in America in the craft brewing industry. They don't make lagers and pilsners. But we had to do it here to try and just get some market share to just pay the bills. Because people weren't really ready for the porters and the pale ales and Weiss beer, etc.
And do you have any of those videos somewhere in
yeah.
Oh, do you still have them?
I do have,
you should put those on YouTube.
Yeah, Andy Mitchell used to be interviewed often. I think they all thought he was the owner, because he was often under the oak tree interviewing people on top billing, that type of program anyway. Yeah.
And he also owned. They also thought he owned Mitchell's Brewery.
Yeah, exactly. And he ended up managing Mitchell's Brewery in Joburg, and then going down to the Cape to Birkenhead. And he was there for about 10 or 15 years, and I think he's the only brewer around that doesn't drink. He only drinks Coke. Oh. So he's now in Adelaide, I think.
Yeah, and I met Andy Mitchell when he was brewing Mitchell's beer at Bavaria.
Yeah.
In Joburg.
Yeah,
it was too expensive to ship it, I think, from Cape Town or Knysna, so he was brewing it at Bavaria.
And he was utilising their packaging plant. I think that was the biggest thing, that he could get an extended shelf life with a bottle and a crown rather than the PE2 bottle, which was their traditional packing in Knysna.
Yeah. So let's go and see where we are today. You've got the Bierfassl, which Sean runs, and you've made some big improvements there. You've installed some new lines and stuff.
Yeah, we've just done Sean basically leases the business there, so it's his business, our asset, and we assisted him in putting 8 to 10 taps now. So because we've got 8 beers with our latest ranges taking off. We keep on thinking, let's bring in a beer just for a fun and a season, but it becomes too popular and we can't take it off tap. So we end up now, we've got 8 taps after being the boring 4 for maybe 10 years, 15 years. And our Swinging Some Mango, which is a mango flavoured beer for the sort of the new drinkers, something a bit sweeter. Our cappuccino, which is our porter with coffee, cappuccino
and
porter.
You've teamed up with a coffee company there.
We have,
branding,
yeah.
Which is quite interesting.
Yeah, we've got the local coffee company, which is Trebador, which is over the just over the freeway. So they're craft coffee, craft beer. And I think it's a really good combination, and the people love it. It's really taken off. So, and then we've got our Wombat, which is a summer ale, which is the base for our mango. So we get some cross-pollination there. So we can use a couple of beers and make a couple of different flavors from. And then, so we've built the range to 8. So now the Bierfassl's got all 8 on tap, whereas before they used to have 4 or 5 when they bring in a guest tap. So it's tidied it up a lot more. We built a new cold room, all new lines, flash coolers. So it's really, and I think they did, I don't know how many, about 40 or 50 kegs over Christmas. So they are one of our biggest outlets, along with Rawdons. And I think that's probably what we're learning after 20 years in the business is to, if I can give any advice to wannabe brewers, is that the brew pub is the way to go. Yeah. You know, unless you're going to spend 120 million like the CBCs and the Darlings and really go into competition with Windhoek and SAB, and you have a shelf life on your beer, you have the latest packaging equipment with double vacuated air, CO2 dosing, crowning, pasteurizing, then you really are taking a chance putting beer into the market in a mass way. So if you can just, with our deck, we're doing beer on our deck straight from the brewery, or you can come down to the
new
hotel.
Development at the hotel, huh?
Yeah, that's
at
right.
The brewery.
Yeah, Knott's Landing. So we're just trying to. When I was in America at the last Brewers Conference, I noticed that we probably, compared to the breweries in the States, we want to make the brewery more inclusive to the public. Whereas before it was the brewery, the shop, come down to drink at Rawdons. So now we're encouraging people to have a beer at the brewery and maybe have a private function up on the new deck. So I think it's going to be a real winner. And I think that if people guys that want to build a brewery can add and get as much of the retail market as possible without going wholesale, I think that's the avenue to success.
Yeah.
So low turnover, high margins.
And your business is, essentially you've always been a hotelier. It's a hotel first and then the brewery is an addition. So you once said to me you don't want a factory on next door to the hotel. But it's changed slightly because the factory is interesting and it's, you've developing that part a little bit now.
Yeah, one of the biggest problems with expanding the brewery too much into the packaged beer market is forklifts, glass bottles, pallets, and it becomes very intrusive on the hotel guests. We've got a full glass bottle range now, which we took years to get onto the bandwagon with that, mainly because of the weight of the bottles and the noise it used to make. But I think the people like to see, particularly the brewing process. They like to see the steam coming out, doing your gravities, talking to the brewer. What beer are you making today? And then they're having one off the tap. So it becomes. We were doing quite a lot of beer tours with online, and they were hugely popular. So the people with the interest in making craft anything these days, I think, is probably. It doesn't matter whether you're doing craft meat and home smoked meat or anything that's craft is going to take off. Anything that the big boys, I feel, that are doing, like bread, artisan bread, artisan cheese, beer. I think that's the future. People want to go back to the basics and they want to be able to know where it's come from.
And especially if they're on holiday, I guess. When did the whole Midlands Meanders thing start?
The Meander started with three guys, Adrian McWilliams, who managed the hotel in the 80s until we arrived in 93. He was one of the founding members. And it was actually Don Atwood who said to him one day, what's there to do in the Midlands? We need to get something up here for the guests to come and see. So they came up with this idea that there was a meander up in the Northern Province somewhere, and they said, let's do a Midlands meander. And so that was actually how the Midlands meander started, was let's get a few of the arty, crafty people, the potters and the cheesemakers, and put the meander together. And I think that the brewery has now become probably one of the biggest stops on the meander.
Definitely.
Now there's a couple more breweries, Lions River and Old Main Brewery, etc. If we can get enough breweries up here to make it a real beer destination, I think that it'll grow the industry and everyone will do quite well out of it.
Yeah, I think so. You planted the word ale trail with me about 2 or 3 years ago when I was doing the beer book, and I think that's become quite a nice kind of concept to organize the ale trail, because most craft brewers want to make ale rather than lager, so I think it's quite a fitting thing, and it's nice to see that you welcome other brewers into the area. I think it's a good thing. I
think it's fantastic. When you go to a car yard, you want to go to 4 or 5 car yards. I think they feed off each other, and I think the concept of the brewery feeds off each other, because you'd like to go around and taste 3 or 4 places within a couple of days or a day, and so I think the concept of the ale trail, it's like in Cape Town, if you could only go and drink Boschendale wine, it would make the wine route very boring. Yeah. So the more, and it keeps us on our toes as well. When new competition comes into the area, you've got to really be inventive, keep the interest in your own product. And I think that's what we didn't do for a long time. We only had 4 beers, and we we went through the ups and downs of the craft industry, where it was up and then it went flat, and then 2008 it dropped because people didn't have money. Thank goodness the growth of craft beer in the Cape, particularly when that started 4 or 5 years ago, has really just given people the insight to go and look for more beer. So the more breweries in the Midlands, the better. Yeah.
And potentially we've got Old Main Brewery in Hilton at the Old Crossways Hotel. Then Lions River, which is not quite ready for the public. There's something happening at Belgowan. And then yourself.
Yeah.
And Blueberry Hills is also, there's talk of something happening there.
Yep. Blueberry Hills, we're talking about quite a big outfit, which I think has been reduced in size a bit, mainly because I think they're also in a very green area, and so the licensing becomes a big issue. So it's I think it's we're in for a good 2017.
So we're looking forward to a good celebration. 21 years of the pig's 21st birthday, as John says. And what else is in store for Nottingham Road Brewing Company, or for Rawdons?
Well, we're in an exciting stage at the moment, I think, particularly with looking at the artisan side, is that the craft gin market and craft whiskey is really taking off. And I noticed that when I was in the States as well, particularly the craft whiskey, to the extent that you go to a lot of restaurants now and they only sell craft whiskey. They don't sell a lot of your traditional blended whiskies, your Johnnies, etc. People are actually going out and saying, what is your local whiskey? So we have now, we've got a little still that we put together with a guy called Peter Weiss. It was his dad's little still. So we're doing some trials at the moment. We're still not ready to go commercially. It's a little 50-litre pot still, so it takes me back to the days when we were doing our 50-litre brews down in the cellar for our beer. And but boy, it's been fun. We put together a little 500-litre, because the beer base is what you need to make whiskey, because it needs to be a malt, a full grain. Bourbon would be rye and malted barley for whiskey. And that is the base for gin and vodka as well. So with one base, we can actually produce 3 different styles of spirits. So we've done a few trials. We've got our first whiskey in the barrel on oak. It needs to sit for 3 years, so that's a bit of a long haul. So we're thinking we'll just put 10% of our production into whiskey and forget about it. Put it into the pension fund. Our first gin, we've done some magnificent trials, or great trials with flavour, and we've got with the help of Peter Weiss, and by the way, it was his father's little still, so it's like 100 years old, and it's got a bit of a soul that really makes good stuff. And so we made about a few litres, and we put into 3 batches, and we did a high juniper content in one, high citrus in the other one, and high herb or botanic flavour in the third, which includes things like lavender, rosemary, and etc. And then we did spent an afternoon just doing some trials, mixing those at different ratios to get, and I think it's really tasting great. So we've got a little shop. Those who know Rawdons, there's a little shop called Squirrels that's sort of been closed for a couple of years, a little home decor shop. So we've gutted that, and we're turning that into the little distillery. And with our tap room onto our deck, we'll then offer our 4 latest craft beers, and our gin, and one day our whiskey and vodka. And you can also do honey mead. You can. So really, we have got the potential to do anything in spirits or in beer, and even ciders.
Okay, it's a lovely story, and if we look at you, Peter, you started your life off as a craftsman, carpenter, and now you're crafting your living, crafting nice beers and nice gins, and hopefully soon some whiskey. It's a very nice story. And where we all know Rawdons, we can find the beers here. Have you got a few other outlets where people can taste your beers?
Yeah, we've got, obviously the Bierfassl, and we've got the tap room provides quite a few places in Joburg.
Okay.
In saying that, we were in a lot of places in Joburg, but with the growth of craft industry, the need for places like Beer House, etc., to bring on new brands the whole time requires us to keep reinventing ourselves for us to get tap space in those places, because they want, they're about craft beer, and they want people that come there need to taste new beers every time they come, almost, so it's I'm reluctant to get too much out into the market. The temptation to go down to Cape Town is huge. But it's logistics. You've got to keep the cold chain going the whole time. You've got to, if you send down stainless steel kegs, you've got to get them back. If you send down PET kegs, you have the problems with puncturing and beer quality. So I keep on saying to myself, just stay small, stay local, spend money on the property, and get more people to the hotel, rather than becoming a big brewer and chasing numbers. And then people come down and say, oh, yeah, but we need you in Cape Town. And I'm thinking, oh, maybe we should go to Cape Town. So it's like it's a real difficult one. It's the coffee porter in particular is something that could do well for a year in Joburg and Cape Town. So maybe to send one of our brands down there just as a pilot sort of release would be fine. But it's I just know that when you start chasing turnover, if you look at the big brewers at CBC and Darling, they tend to get wound up in their volumes rather than having fun making beer. How many kegs have we sold today, and having big meetings with all your shareholders trying to justify the expense. So I think there's definitely two sides to it. Stay very small or get very big.
And that's otherwise it becomes eating soup with a fork, isn't it?
Exactly.
There's no profit.
Yeah. Okay. Just chasing turnover is probably the biggest mistake most SMEs make.
And then and you have a few speciality outlets in Durban that you service, like Hillcrest Tops. There's a couple of other Topses in Durban North. So.
Eastman's, the new ones. We've once again, it's if you look at the small brewers who are looking at expanding into those markets, to go that next step requires a staff member full time. It requires cold rooms. It requires trucks. It requires 10 to 15,000 rand per outlet to set up chillers, taps, etc. And all of a sudden, you don't have to be a brain surgeon to see if you can sell to the public at 70 rand a litre instead of selling to the trade at 20 rand a litre. You can sell half the volumes and still get the same profits. And I think that you mustn't be too tied up in trying to get into lots of outlets, because they're all going to phone you on Saturday and say there's a problem with the beer. Unless you've got the backup staff like an SAB or to actually go and service those outlets, you're just going to do injustice to your product. And it's all about looking after the brand. If people don't find it everywhere, but when they do find it, it's extra special, then I think that's probably the way to be. Okay, good. Nice to chat, Peter, and I think we're going to let you go there. Perfect. We'll go and make some more gin. Cheers. Cheers. Wow, it's been a long slog for Peter Dean and his family. 21 years. From a 50-litre brew kettle to what they have now. And the quality of the beer is really good. Really exciting stuff happening at Nottingham Road Brewing Company. So, guys, please, next time you're in the Midlands, pop in at Rawdons and at the Bierfassl and just see what's happening there. And when you pop into the little shop at the brewery, look out, there's copies of the beer book for sale. And that means the next one's on me. Yeah, there's nearly 80 free beers in the beer book. So grab a copy, and every time you visit one of these little breweries, you can get a beer for free.
And that really pays for the beer book. Peter Dean, thank you for creating a piece of heaven for all the beer lovers in the Midlands. And we look forward to your dream of creating an ale trail in the Midlands meander. Thank you, and we'll see you on the ale trail.